Today we have James Eddy, Campus Director, and Ricky Allen, Military Outreach Coordinator from Stratford University, Newport News campus. First, I would like to thank both of you for being here. Welcome to our studios.
Absolutely.
How are you guys doing today?
Doing wonderful. How about yourself?
Doing well. The weather's been a lot more appropriate, I think, comfortable.
Yeah. Not nearly as much muggy heat out there. I love
No.
it. So.
Feels better, yeah.
So I want to thank you guys for coming in and joining us for our conversations today, for our discussions. We have a lot to talk about. Our topics today are the future of education system based on technological advances, online versus classroom education, and how active duty and veterans juggle and attend classes. They all kind of pertain to each other.
Absolutely.
And they're all very important topics of discussion. So.
Absolutely. Well, with the trends in education these days, online education's obviously taken a very big step forward in the past 10 years
Yeah.
anyway. Prior to that, it kind of had a stigma attached to it. Now you see all the major universities stepping into it a little bit more, and that's in turn increasing the technologies and increasing opportunities for veterans as well. So, absolutely.
So one of the first questions that I have is, when this trend started of online education with the technology that we have and the access that everyone has to the internet, did anyone realize how big it was going to be? Was it just a trend, do you think? Tell me what your opinion is.
Well, interestingly enough, if you go back and look at like Bill Gates back when the internet first started, even he said it was just a fad. And I don't think anybody could have imagined. He actually published those words in his first book, and I don't think anybody could have anticipated what backward statement that was going to be. So I think online education was one of those things that was kind of seen as a lower form of education in the beginning, and I don't think the major universities, the traditional academia, would have recognized that. It was more of your non-traditional universities, your for-profit systems, and some of your privately owned colleges that went toward the online system to try to accommodate more students. So that's kind of where the online education system came into play. And as you get into these dual income families where everybody's working now, it's more and more common practice to go and take some classes online, take some classes on ground, or go entirely online.
Not to mention, when you think about how the world has responded to the whole global economy when it comes to everything being done online. There are a lot of companies that work remotely. I've had some experience working for a company out in California, and I never saw them physically, but I did a lot of the work from home.
Right.
So it was going to only be natural that the education system would come right behind and kind of do the same things. For example, when I was in Rota, Spain stationed, I did some schooling from the London School of Journalism in the UK. I did it all right from the comforts of my home. So it benefited me, because I could still get some schooling started at least.
Right.
And get some training.
Brick and mortar is, don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic education method.
Right.
You have the interaction with the teacher, you have certain resources in the classroom, you have all those resources right there in the classroom, whereas your online medium is more of the flexible scheduling options for those of us who work all the time.
Right.
When I started taking classes, I did a little bit of both with the brick and mortar and online classes toward my education, because I was working from 8 in the morning to 10 at night teaching classes almost 24/7. So I was teaching day and night classes.
Right.
So I went home, and 10 to 2 a.m. I was doing classes, and then I'd wake up at 6 o'clock and I'd start my day all over again.
That sounds vicious.
It was vicious. It was vicious, but it allowed me that flexibility to do that, so I
Right.
could kind of take both the online and the brick and mortar classes, so I could have that flexibility.
And financially, it's helping out thousands of millions of families, especially for those who want to go to a particular college or university, but they live hundreds of miles away from it. So you got to think about the travel, the expense of room and board and everything. This gives them the chance to fulfill their dream of going to Notre Dame or going to UVA, and
Right.
colleges and universities of that nature, without doing too much to do it. And that saves money for the family, saves money for the student. So if he or she wants to get that first car, they can now.
Right. Also, if you're not a traditional student and you're first going to college at the age of 40, when you're at 40, you don't need to live in a dorm. That whole
I don't think I'd
dorm
want to live
life,
in a dorm.
no.
Yeah.
I will say I definitely have a different opinion of online classes and education now, but initially I did not believe in it at all. And that was just my opinion. And
Yeah. Well, and like I said, you're not alone. I think all the major universities were the same way. When I got my bachelor's and master's degrees, again, I did both the online and the on-ground version of classes. And schools like, I'm going to just shout one out, Penn State, they wouldn't really use the online method as a viable option. But 10 years later, my wife, she's gone back and taken some of her graduate classes online through Penn State's worldwide campus. It's just something that we kind of paved the way through the, I guess the way of not having that traditional acceptance. We paved the way with the online medium and made it more of an acceptable format for the major players in the academia to actually go down that road.
How do you think that online classes benefit military? To me, it's an obvious question, but
It's an obvious question.
It's an
of course
obvious
we
question,
know.
but we need.
Yeah, I've been in the military now going on 16 years. We're going on year 17 as of this week, as a matter of fact, as a reservist.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're very
And
welcome.
I can tell you from personal experience, when you're able to transfer some of those classes online, when you got to deploy, or if you're just in the business of life, when I'm trying to balance military, regular work, family, Cub Scouts, trying to squeeze in a date night somewhere between there, you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I have time for this? And you're able to manage it a little bit better. You don't have to go too far outside of your schedule, knowing that you have that online option to go to. You can stay at home. Only thing you gotta do then is block some time out to get the work done.
Right.
But for those who deploy on a daily basis, from combat camera, for example, they deploy quite a bit. Our special forces deploy quite a bit. Our ships, they deploy consistently.
Right.
You got to think about those sailors and Marines and airmen that are on those ships that are in school when they're in port, and they're trying to figure out, okay, well, I got to finish this class up to keep my degree map correct. And so the more the online option can be presented to them, the more they're going to stay and the more they're going to go.
Right.
Well, and it's funny too, because when I was doing a master's program, I met so many people that were actually in Afghanistan and in Kuwait and in Iraq at the time. Then they were taking classes from a tent with a satellite connection, and that just kind of made me feel better about the whole situation, to know that there was somebody out there doing their service to the country and still able to get their education. So it does open a lot of doors.
And that proves the success and the importance of how
Absolutely.
online education has definitely benefited.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Great section one.
Thank you guys for joining us again. Now I think we should talk a little bit more about the online versus classroom education. I have a couple of curiosity questions on how you think that the future of education is going. Do you think online versus classroom, do you think online education is going to hinder the number of students in classroom, or do you think it's always going to be kind of a hybrid mix?
Well, it really depends on your learning style. I mean, Howard Gardner has a theory of multiple intelligences, and it goes into spatial, mathematical, artistic, visual, kinesthetic learning, all these different kinds of ways that individuals learn. And one of the things that becomes a challenge in education, both with primary and secondary school, and post-secondary school, is that you need to kind of teach to the student's way of learning. Online isn't going to be for everybody. And the bottom line is when you're talking about a purely kinesthetic learner that needs that hands-on aspect of things, you need that hands-on aspect of things, it's very, very difficult, for example, to have a cooking class in an online environment.
I would agree.
I can only picture somebody like moving a pot around on the graphic screen and trying
Right.
to figure out how to cook online.
Right.
That's not possible.
Right.
Nursing, I don't want somebody who's going to be taking an online nursing class and doing all of their strict CPR skills and everything else. If they've never had any hands-on training, I don't want them working on me.
I agree.
So there's a place for online education, and I think that's got to evolve a little bit. So I don't think you're ever going to do away with the online or the brick and mortar version of learning. There's just going to be some different ways to teach some of our newer technologies. IT is fairly easy. Business, you can kind of go both ways with that, but there are some programs that are just not going to be cut out for online for a little while yet.
So basically you're saying also that the general education courses could easily be done away with classroom too.
In some cases, and again, it all depends on the learning. I will tell you, for example, that I had no problem taking college composition online, but then they put me into a calculus class, and I thought I was going to die. You know, it was one of those things that that would have been an environment where I would have appreciated an instructor to kind of either throw my book at or bounce ideas off of, one or the other, because I could not understand the first chapter of this calculus book. And I went around to all my peers, and I went around to everybody that I knew that understood math to ask for help on this, and it took me some time. I got through it. You've never seen me so happy to earn a B- in a class in my life, but I got through it. It's a very difficult class to learn online if you have a different learning style.
I would like to echo that too, because it's definitely a great deal of learning style versus teaching style that you're dealing with there. I know for me, there were some classes I enjoyed doing in the classroom. Because for one, I wanted student interaction beyond a screen. I mean, we do a lot in front of the screen already, from emails to Facebook.
Absolutely.
So getting a break from the screen and going to actually, be with other students and talking about the lesson at hand, and having the teacher up front giving us the instructions on how to do certain mathematical problems or how to do stat data to, different things like that. It's beneficial and on several levels. It's just healthy. I'm sure there's been several studies in regards to just taking a break from the computer screen every so often, just going out and doing something else, and that kind of falls right in line with that. And then there are other learning styles where there may be some classes, like James said, that are good online, you'll get it, everything's fine, to something that's very complex that you may have to get on the phone and call somebody and email somebody and have to wait for a response, and even then the steps they may give you, you may not really understand, and so it just really depends on where you are and how you learn at the age you're at that one point you're at, in comparison to where you have how you learned before. Because we all we grow up, you get older, you got a lot of things going on, so your learning style changes. You go from being conditioned in a classroom when you're younger to either going to college, going to the military, or getting a job, and then you're saying, okay, for those who are going to the military, getting a job and everything, now you're trying to say, okay, I want to go back to school now. Well, you've been conditioned to learn a different way at that point. So now you got to get back to that mode of thinking, okay, well, how do I learn now versus how do I learn then? And once you find that, then you're able to determine a whole lot better whether it's online is the best way or just being in a classroom is a better way.
Well, then to dovetail on that just a little bit more, online classes, I think, take a little bit more self-discipline.
Absolutely.
You have to motivate yourself. You don't have somebody in a classroom, including your peers and your teacher. You don't have people kind of rooting you on and kind of, helping hold your hand a little bit. With online classes, I mean, you have to motivate yourself. You have to drive yourself the entire time. So it takes a really different kind of person, not just a different kind of learner, to take an online class. I have seen straight A students in my career go to an online class and fail every time. It's not because they're not intelligent. It's not because they don't have the skill set. It's just because it's a different type of person.
It absolutely is a different type of person and a different type of learning. I've taken a couple of online courses, and they are not for me.
Yeah.
And also takes some support as well from your family.
It does.
You have to make sure they understand and grasp the concept of when you're doing your class, you can't be running behind the kids, or you can't be doing other assignments, or in my case, a honey-do list.
Right.
I mean, everybody has to understand, this has to be done. I mean, there's a lot being invested here. It's a long-term investment, and everybody has to be all in on that. They have to, understand you can't, don't speak to daddy right now. He's doing a paper, or he's in a class.
Right.
So it has to be understood by the entire support network in the home. Now for those who don't have families yet, or maybe just be couples or single, I mean, it's still, the discipline still has to be there. I mean, there has to be some kind of support network there to make sure that they are staying on the path. Some folks are not as, may not be as disciplined online, or may discover a slight culture shock in realizing, oh, I forgot to post 3 times a day. I forgot to do this paper, so it's always good to have somebody there that's going to help you and remind you and keep you on that way, so it's a lot more to just sitting down in front of that computer at the house.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It does take a whole lot more structure. It's not that I'm not disciplined, but it just wasn't. I'm a tactile learner.
Yeah.
I'm definitely the classroom. I need the interaction. And there was the interaction. I do agree that the chat rooms, and you're not alone and you don't feel like you're alone, but
Right.
that's just, I am impressed by those that can do it, because I cannot.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I've also taught brick and mortar classes and taught online classes. The interesting thing is from my perspective, I prefer to take an online class, but I prefer to teach brick and mortar. I think I can get a point across better as a teacher when I have that interface with people and I can read their body their facial expressions and their reactions to what I'm saying. It's a lot easier for me to infer understanding on this part of the student when I'm looking at the student in the face and I can see the confusion or
Right.
the acceptance of what I've said. It's a whole different story when you're reading a post. It's like they sound like they know what they're talking about,
Precisely.
but you can't read the body language.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the other thing that I appreciate about being in a classroom, is that I can actually get the emotion. We're humans.
Yes.
We're not robots. We're not computers. There's great uses and great possibilities, and computers are wonderful.
Yes.
And being able to do the online classes is a fantastic thing. And I know it's not going anywhere, but I
Should get
firmly
better.
believe that there should, I am a strong believer in interaction, actual human interaction.
Well, and I think you'll see more of that coming, especially as the multimedia and the video aspect of the classroom start becoming more prevalent. Right now, it's more discussion boards. You see a couple of schools out there doing the video dialogue and
Right.
some of the web-based lectures, and I think it's slowly moving in that direction. And as it becomes cheaper technology to implement, I think you're going to see more of that too. So you might see a little bit more of that classroom environment in a virtual format
Right.
soon enough.
I think that I could handle a little bit better.
Yeah.
At least I would feel like I'm really there and involved. But
Yeah.
Now, one thing should never change though, whether it's in the classroom or online, that's good communication. Especially with our military, the instructors, first of all, have to understand what type of student they're dealing with. Understand that if they don't hear from them, that doesn't mean they may have blown it off. They might be coming off duty all night. You have to come in and sleep and have to wake up and actually make this happen, when it comes to education. So, and that goes for both facets of this. You got to communicate, especially if there's a deployment coming up or if there's something going on where you've got to leave for a few days on a school. I mean, that's where the university and the military student must come together, and one must understand the other and make sure that all the goals are being met, the deliverables are coming in, and everybody knows what's going on in the other person's life. Otherwise, you're going to get a great deal of confusion. You're going to get written off or passed over. You're going to be sitting there wondering, okay, well, what happened to this student? I mean, I heard he was this great sailor. I heard he was this great Marine, and we're here in the classroom, and I don't see it. Well, that instructor has to ask those questions. And as we move further as a country, we're seeing a lot more education with the instructors, coming out. A lot of them are being trained on how to talk to military folks, how to understand what's going on in their life. I mean, I've seen families switching kids in the parking lot, so one can go to class and the other one can go home. So I've seen that happen. So it's some things will evolve, but a lot of things will stay the same. There's nothing wrong with that.
right.
And communication is one of those that will probably definitely stay the same, if not get better all the time.
Do you see a rise in online enrollment due to the economy? Does that affect it all?
The economy plays a part, sure. I mean, especially when you're dealing with different socioeconomic groups that may not have access to reliable transportation, for example. Online is going to be a big factor in their decisions. The one thing, though, that I will say is that generally, I've noted that most online formats tend to be more expensive. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that regard. So
that was another question I had, was cost of
yeah,
person.
well, I mean, especially when you look at traditional academia, most of your regionally accredited academic universities, they tend to charge more for their online campuses than they do for like your in-state tuition, for example, for somebody who's actually going to a campus-based school. I would imagine it's because they're trying to subsidize the cost of the technology and how they're delivering the information. But that being said, it still creates that flexibility for a student in a different socioeconomic background. I mean, if you're a single parent, for example, and I don't have the funding or the money to hire babysitters for my children, and I might have a job, but I can only work while the kids are in school, and then I have to come home and get them when they get off the bus. That's going to impact your online education as well, because quite frankly, there's a lot of students that I've tried to help in my career where they can't go to class past 1 or 2 o'clock, and that's the only time the class is offered.
Right.
So you have to switch to an online format if you want to be able to take these classes and finish your degree in time. So it does create that flexibility for all socioeconomic groups.
Do you think that the student-teacher relationships are just as strong with online classes? I know we were speaking about the communication. Do you feel that students are just as likely to reach out to their online professors as they would bricks and mortar?
That's an interesting question, because as far as reaching out to your instructor, sometimes, and it all depends on your personality, when you're talking about a virtual instructor, it's a lot easier for me to pose a question to him in his email or in his personal chat box or whatever, however they have that structured, instead of asking a question in front of my peers in a classroom. Sometimes some people might be more embarrassed to do it that way. They might be more intimidated to ask a question that sounds like a dumb question to them. And we always say as instructors, I think every teacher I've ever heard or worked with say there's no such thing as a dumb question, but we all think there is.
Right. I believe there's no dumb questions.
I agree with you, but at the same time, there's still questions like, do I want to ask that question right now? I mean, am I going to look like I don't know what I'm talking about if I ask that question at this particular moment?
Right.
And there's going to be some students who don't feel comfortable asking in a classroom environment, but they're more comfortable asking online. Now, that relationship, I will tell you from my personal experience, I feel like there's a gap in the relationship between an instructor and a student in the online format, just because, again, you don't get that face-to-face interaction. You don't see as much of it. So you have to work harder to establish a relationship. You have to communicate more frequently. You have to respond to more of their discussion forum posts. You have to try to interact with them. Some instructors will share their phone numbers and try to chat with the student once a week. I think that's an admirable thing. The relationship is really going to be one of the points that make a student more successful. If they're comfortable with you, they're going to be more successful because they're asking questions and they're interacting with you.
Yeah.
It's a really big challenge online. So you can have some really good ones, really good online instructors, but it just, that relationship's going to be
And I think that kind of goes the same whether it's online or physical. You're going to have those experiences with some instructors that have a great personality, they're very personable, and they're able to really engage the student. And then you may have that one where he or she may stay by the book. Here's the instruction. We're going to teach. Here are my hours when you can call me. Here are the hours when you can't call me. And they'll leave it at that. And it's not that they're choosing to be that way. That's just who they are.
Right.
That's beyond training. That's just a personality.
Right.
They're well educated. They have everything in place, but everybody's personality is different, and that goes as well. On the other side with students. You have some students who will engage the instructor and make sure they have all the questions answered, and then you have some that will just sit there, whether it's online or physical, and they may wait for somebody to ask the question they want to ask. And we've all had those classmates.
Right.
I've had several when I was in school where they would say, "Thank you for asking that question. I wanted to ask it, but I wasn't sure." And
Right.
that element is always going to be in the classroom. I don't think we'll ever get away from that.
I think we're going to take a break right now. We'll be back in just a few minutes. lead a little bit more towards the active duty and the military. We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I want to understand a little bit more how someone in the military functions through college, through taking classes, and it can. This is a huge, broad topic from beginning to end. I actually was completely naive and had no idea, and I did ask someone, how does someone in the military go to school?
Well, it has a lot to do with several elements. First being command support.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our service members do get a lot of advice from their superiors in regards to when the best time is to start, some good options on where to go, and to make sure that the curriculum they're looking for is there and is of a good quality.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first level. Then from there to go through the whole world of getting everything signed up and tuition assistance and the financial aid they needed, and going through that whole process. A lot of that's what the part they do with the university of their choice.
Okay.
And you can only hope that they have a military outreach coordinator there like myself that helps them through the process of helping them to relax and say, okay,
Yeah.
you're going to get through this. This is the part that everybody goes through. It's like pulling teeth. It's a long, process of making sure that you have all your ducks in a row, all this is taken care of. That way, when you get to the classroom, you can sigh a breath of relief,
right.
And actually focus on the curriculum at hand rather than wondering, did everything get approved?
So it's my understanding that if I were to go to school now, if I were to go to college, that not being in the military versus someone that is, it's a whole lot more involved.
It is. It can be. It depends on what mission you're on right now. Some folks are on the ship, some folks are on shore, and that can really determine how your college life goes. It might be a matter of taking a few classes right now, 1 or 2, or actually going full time. And that is contingent on deployment schedules, duty schedules, all those elements play a major role in how your college life will go in the military. But it is doable, though. As we've seen, especially at Stratford and other universities, that the university must be willing and able to work with that military student. They must be willing to understand, okay, here's someone who already has a very busy schedule. He or she is serving our country at the top of the ladder, first of all. Right. And they're coming to our university to get, education, to use their benefits, to get that degree they've been aspiring to have for 3 or 4 years in their tour. And now it's obviously the right time for them. And you want to make sure that you are communicating with them and supporting them and letting them understand that you're more than just benefits.
Right.
You're more than that. We're here to make sure that you get what you've come for. This is a long-term investment. This is something that's going to help you in the long run when you're ready to get out of the military and get that that job that you want. You'll have this in place and you'll have a good college experience. Just because you're not going to a traditional program where you're staying in the dorm and you're going through your one of 300 or 400 people, you can still have a good college experience as a military serviceman. So when you take all those elements, you put them together, that's the success for a military student in a university or college. It's a lot. It looks like a lot and it sounds like a lot, but in the end of the day, they become just like another college student. They're a student who they're serving our country. They want to be treated like a college student. They don't want to be pointed out. They don't want to be isolated or separated, even though we have several organizations like the Student Veterans of America, which is alive and growing, 1,000 chapters strong, and Stratford is going to have 4 here by the end of the year. Good on that. So there are things that cater to veterans. There are a lot of stores now that are actually giving veteran students discounts. You may not know the DMV has a veteran ID card that they can go get. Yes, if they're not signed up with their VA office, they can go to the DMV and for I think some kind of fee over there, they can get a veteran ID card. So there are things that are going on in Hampton Roads to really serve our veterans here. That is phenomenal and is outstanding.
If you have government funding to go to college, is there a specific time frame that someone has to do this by, or is it an open end? Okay. There's
a particular time frame. I know when I went, I had about 8 years or so to use my benefits. Up to that point, then you kind of there's not really a lot for you there, or you have to use the post 9/11 GI Bill, which you can actually transfer to other folks in your family, whether it's a wife or a child, and then they have the opportunity to do that. That's something new.
Okay.
Before that, you had the regular Chapter 30 benefits, where pretty much you that was pretty much you got the whole amount of money to your account and you had to pay the school or whatever the school setup was at that time. Sometimes the money would go to the school, or sometimes it came to you and then you would pay the school. You know,
Okay.
so it depends on whatever policy that school has at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but right now with 9/11 benefits, it's it's very, very great. I mean, it's a great change to our nation's response to our veterans and the active duty components that are coming home, getting ready to get out, or the veterans who are already out that are looking to get started in school, or may have finished up their schooling in the service, and they have these benefits. And you've got Junior getting ready to go to college. Well, he has a benefit now. He has
Right.
a great head start to a little bit of financial backing.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's so versatile now.
A good segue for them to get back into.
It takes a little bit of time, but it is a good segue. I think one of the first things they need to realize is the environment in the civilian sector is a little different from the military sector. So you got to get over that, and that can be a culture shock to some.
Right.
I know in many of my interviews with students, that's the first thing they realize is different. That once upon a time you go from having a lot of people you're hanging out with on the weekends. You're calling. You kind of have an idea of what you're doing is it's structured fun. Because everything's in place too.
Right.
Going into maybe moving to a neighborhood where everybody doesn't really talk to one another, or
Right.
going to a job where there isn't that cohesiveness there, to where they're doing picnics on the weekend or cooking out outside of the building. So there's a lot of elements there when it comes to that environment that can change. And I think before you do anything, you got to get adjusted to that change.
Sure.
And if you have a university that is helping you with that, then the segue will be smooth, and it helps in a variety of ways. Besides getting you a degree, you're kind of getting back into that civilian sector nice and slow. So.
Yeah, the other thing about that too is that the translation from the military workforce to the civilian workforce can be complicated.
Sure.
So there's a lot of people out there, or a lot of schools out there that are actually what we call military-friendly schools. That's what the Military Times calls the schools that tend to reach out to the veterans a little bit more to help that transition more, possibly have a little bit more flexibility in the interpretation of their SMART transcripts or their military transcripts, CCAF transcripts, and try to bring them in with as much of a head start and a benefit as they can, because a lot of those skills that I learned in the Air Force, or that he learned in the Navy, might not seem like an obvious translation to the civilian world.
Right.
But it could be interpreted, a lot of what we did as management courses or some other things that might translate into that civilian workforce. So you really, as a veteran, you want to look for a school that is a military-friendly school, because they're going to have a little bit more interpretation there and a little bit more flexibility to help you adapt.
I'm finding the more I interact with the colleges in our area that there is a whole lot more hands-on interaction with students that goes on as far as versus when I went to school 20 years ago. There's a whole lot more attention to the student success. There's a whole lot more passion about making sure that the courses and that the path that the student is on is a path to success. And I think it's fantastic, because I felt like just a number. I mean, there was interaction with my teachers, with my instructors, but as far as guidance to make sure that what I was doing was the right career, whether it was going to be a profitable career, if I was really taking the right courses, it was more or less just making sure you got the right things in to graduate.
Right.
And not so much that I was on the right path that was designed for me and my personality and what my true passions were, and whether or not it's like letting 2,000 students go to school to get an English degree, knowing that the only thing they're really going to be able to use that degree for is to be a teacher, and 100 of those students are actually cut out to be teachers.
Right. And it's interesting. I was going to touch on the exact same thing. It's interesting you'd say that, because there are schools, there are some universities and colleges out there that have they do feasibility studies before they even launch a program, and it really depends on your accreditation to some extent. But our accrediting body, for example, actually grades us on retention, placement, graduation. So if we don't have enough of our students coming out at graduation and getting a job in their field, they'll shut that program down. That's the way our accreditation works. That's not the way all accreditations work for all universities. So you do have some people that'll go through and get a degree in French literature. What are you going to do with that unless you plan on moving to France in the near future?
Right.
I mean,
And then when you move to France, what are you going to do with it?
exactly. And you know, that kind of helps some schools, you know, give an advantage to a student, because you're really going to be holding a piece of their life until the very end, until they actually have the job.
Right.
And they have that new career. And that's one of the things that I think I've gotten a lot of gratification out in my career in education, is that I'm not just there to watch them get a piece of paper, although that's a great aspect of it. I love graduations.
Right.
But when you actually have them come visit you a couple years later in class and tell you, hey, I'm making more money than you, it's like, okay, maybe that wasn't what I wanted to hear you say, but you feel good about what you did for that student.
Absolutely.
Because you know, that's something that you want to have for the students. It's just
Right.
like your own children. You want your children to do better than you.
You want
You
them
want
to
your
be
students to do better than
successful.
you too. So
Absolutely.
that's something that we look at every day.
And it benefits both parties when you have that good relationship. When you need students to participate in events or represent the university at different activities, you know, I know for my job, we use them quite a bit when it comes to activities. We like to get them out there and represent Stratford, you know, and it's good. It's good when you have that relationship. A lot of our students don't even walk past the receptionist area without speaking to our administrative assistants. They have that type of relationship with them, to where it's more than just official. They can come in and say, hi, how you doing? And you find out a lot in some casual conversation. You can always find out whether or not things are going good, things are going a little rocky, they may not understand something. You can take care of those problems then.
Right.
Just with a 5-minute conversation of simply, how are you doing? How's class?
It's amazing how just showing personal interest in someone can change it. Just like you said, a 5-minute conversation can change their opinion of how you look at them. You know, offering that 5 seconds of human interaction, and I use that word again, but adding that level of comfort in you showing interest in someone, how it's going to give them, I'm not just another student. I'm not just another number.
Exactly.
And showing that you care and that you're concerned and that you want to help them, you know, that you're there for support and not just outside of the immediate faculty that are involved too. I mean, that to me, I think is fantastic. I love to walk through a campus and see people working in the office saying hi to the students by name. I think that's fantastic.
Well, especially when you work in a military environment. I mean, when I grew up as an Air Force brat, so I mean, I had it my entire 20 years, and everybody knows everybody on base. You respect everybody. Everybody has the same kind of relationship. You just expect the same consideration from everybody you run into. And I've never had that problem. You kind of want to create that same environment for military students on campus.
Especially as the numbers we have at Newport News, we have about 100 plus. And so when you're looking at, that's a lot of veterans there that come from all the branches of the military. You know, they come in with years and decades of experience under the belt. Some of them were retirees, some of them got out for various reasons. You know, but still that mentality is there. You know, that's why I try to walk around and speak to them and see how things are going and make sure things are going well. And it validates that when we talk to them in the beginning part of the process, that this is for real. You know, this is not just, you know, mouth work saying, okay, I'm gonna keep up with you. And they be like, yeah, you just soon get his benefits out of the way. I'm not gonna see you again probably. But when they get that phone call and they can hear that sincerity in your voice and your tone,
Absolutely.
you know, it brings it right on home with them. That they have somebody that is actually following, keeping up with them, making sure that everything's in place, making sure they don't have any questions, from visiting the classrooms, you know, to just going, you know, being at the events. And they know there's an approachable environment there for them to come to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation. I learned a lot. I think this was very, very informative. We thank everyone for joining us today on NHR Weekly. Please join us for our upcoming shows where we will be discussing education costs, the differences between public and private schools, and the methods of recruiting students.